Hello, I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP. And first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video and subsequently visiting my channel. The topic of this video is going to be a summation of my thoughts on INFJs so far. And what I hope to communicate in this video is, first and foremost, that I would appreciate if an INFJ watches, say, my video on the paradox of INFJs, then they should watch my on INFJs part 1 and part 2 video, and they should watch my on the paradox of INFJs a revisit video and wed those things together to get an actual picture of what I think about the INFJ. First and foremost, I would say that they're complex, and I think that that's the thing that most typological descriptions miss about an INFJ. And it's not just the case that they're complex in terms of their emotional landscape and the overall feelings that they have and the intuitive revelatory experiences that they have in the world. I'm I mean to say that they're complex in the sense that they really do have contradictory factors to their nature. Um, and that's all I was ever really trying to explicate. And I think oftentimes when people are hearing me say that INFJs don't necessarily care about people in the way that people think that they care about them, is I think that people are misunderstanding care for concern. And I'm not saying INFJs don't have concern for people from a general standpoint. INFJs are some of the most, I would think, kind and egalitarian in at least their external sentiments as individuals. Though I know just from conversations with some INFJs that because their outward appearance is egalitarian does not mean that their inward thoughts and motives and motivations oftentimes are egalitarian in the sense that INFJs, not all of them think that there aren't differences in people. I mean, I've not encountered that necessarily, and surprisingly, INFJs also aren't inert to their own desires and goals. So they are particularly interested in being industrious and seeing their goals come to fruition. And they seek usually whatever means of competence and social ends to bring those things about. I'm not saying that they're all Hitler or anything like that, but what I mean to say is that INFJs spend their time socially engineering those things that they want and desire to happen, and they're being rather instrumentative in the world. And you can, if you observe them, especially in a workplace setting, that they're rather instrumentative with their interactions with people. And I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with that, or that that that's immoral or anything like that, but just to show this both sides of the coin with the INFJ, that they are these metaphysical relational agents, but at the same time they're very much human, and they very much concern themselves with people generally, but that doesn't necessarily mean they care about people as a whole. That doesn't mean that they don't care about people individually. I mean, I think INFJs are some of the most relational types there are in the MBTI landscape, but I suppose I make a differentiation between care and concern because I don't think most INFJs want to sacrifice themselves for people. I think INFJs will, and what I mean by that is I think that INFJs will give up their momentary, immediate comfort for, let's just say, the overall stability of the social tapestry, but that doesn't mean at the end of the day that they're necessarily I just say please to give up all of their desires, wants, and various things like that for the sake of everybody in their office space, or everybody that they come in contact with at a Starbucks or anything like that. Just because they're kind and generous people and they're fairly agreeable doesn't mean that they necessarily care about every person. I mean, there are people that INFJs would willingly sacrifice themselves for, but I think when people see them act in a broader social sense and they see them being this kind of more saintly figure, people should understand that that's because of a certain set of principles that they hold that are pretty idiosyncratic to that INFJ and that they believe in and they think. You don't have to know what those things are, but they think them and they believe them and they act them out. And they don't really care if another person knows or thinks or agrees with them. Though secretly they definitely want somebody to understand them and agree with them. They want someone who they find is their kindred spirit in the world. They want that true love. They want that soulmate. They want that individual. They want that, but they do not expect to find that person in every individual. And that doesn't, and I don't mean to say that they're false or superficial or anything like that. I'm not somebody who has Christian values or something like that. I mean, I don't. Hopefully it's clear what I mean by that, in the sense that I don't think just because somebody doesn't feel a certain way about people that makes them inherently immoral because they smile at people because they would rather instill positive emotion in people, but they don't smile at that person because they're necessarily pleased with them for something that person means to them or has done for them, specifically. So what I mean is, if an INFJ talks to a person, so if you watch them in a classroom setting or something like that, if they talk to a person, they're usually going to be rather, I wouldn't say necessarily, yeah, I might as well say gregarious, but it's kind of a lulled gregariousness. They're not as extroverted as, say, an ENFJ, but they're pretty amicable. They're very good at setting people on ease and being rather well in conversation and polite and various things like that, but I wouldn't mistake that for saying that INFJ necessarily cares about that person. Why would they care about that person? I suppose that's something I should have said in my other videos, but why would they care about that person? They don't really know them, per se, in the sense that person hasn't really communicated the sense that they should care about them. That doesn't mean they don't concern themselves with people. Care and concern are very different things. Concern is like a motherly instinct. Care is something more. It's like, I would say INFJs definitely have motherly instincts, not to say that male INFJs are mothers or anything like that. What I would say is INFJs have rather nurturing instincts to people, in the sense that they rather see what's good for people occur, and they rather see what's good for the world occur, and they would rather spend their time trying to bring those things about in some general or some local sense. But that does not mean that they care. That's different than care to me, because care to me is something more of a relational component. You only care about people that you have real relationships with, ones that you intuit some sort of impression that you two individuals are in this together. And I don't think that INFJs feel like they're in this together with every person that they encounter on the street. And I'm not saying that they haven't had meaningful relationships in their lives or anything like that. I'm not saying that they don't love people. I mean, INFJs, if they really do love something or love a person, they love it, ride or die. They love that person or that thing. I mean, they're very emotional creatures. I'm not saying that they're not, but the reality is there's just two sides to that coin. There's who they operate as in the world in an instrumentative sense, how they would like to see social things go, the ways in which they think society should be structured, the ways in which they're honestly willing to be, I INFJs are more, I guess, can be somewhat Machiavellian and will to power than people, I guess, really think or admit. You don't want to make yourself an obstacle to an INFJ. And I'm not saying INFJs are necessarily cruel or anything like that, but if you think that they're not strategic, and if you think that they're not, if they won't necessarily, not to say that they care. I'm not saying an INFJ is going to physically assault you or anything like that, but what I'm saying is that they're self-interested, and they're self-interested in a way that's not exactly evident or apparent, because their self-interest is in the sense that most people, you can't really know yourself or see yourself without being reflected, without yourself being reflected by others. And what I mean is that, before we had mirrors and we had other ways of viewing our image and seeing ourselves in the world, we only had one another. So it was definitely the case that unless you stumbled onto a pond or a stream or something like that and you saw your reflection in the water, mostly who you thought of yourself as, or your image, was what others told you about yourself, or was how other people responded to you. It was about the impressions that were elicited in the world because of your presence that told you who and what you are. And that's really how it still goes for people for the most part. And INFJs are like this. Extroverted feelers are like this fundamentally. I mean, most of them, even INTPs to a certain extent, because you can only really know yourself and kind of feel okay and certain with yourself when there is some sort of external confirmation to some particular thing. It's not, the idea of self is not an internal locus and resonance for most extroverted feelers. It's an external thing. And with INFJs, it's the case that they know themselves through the ways in which they're connected to the external world. It's this, their locus of self is something that's internal but emanates outwards. It's very different than what an INFP does, in the sense that their locus of self is drawing things into them, but an INFJ is taking self and expressing it out in the world so that self will be connected to other things in the world. And it's this connectivity to the external world that animates them as an individual and makes them feel as if life is meaningful. But that is still self-interest. I mean, they do certain things and are a certain way with people because they like to be thought well of by other people. They like for people to consider them in a certain way because they, whether instinctually or consciously, they know that they want their goals met in the world. And they know that it's relatively better to get along with people than to have them at your throat. And I'm not saying that that's immoral or wrong or anything like that. I think human beings are animals fundamentally, so I don't really have any kind of moral standpoint on any of those things, but I think that that's really how they are. And it's not to say, and I don't mean that's really how they are, barring or excluding everything else that's true about them. I mean, that's really how they are. Make that an addendum to all the other things that you've heard anyone say in terms of, the INFJ's personality, because, they can even be confrontational. I mean, they certainly can be confrontational. You may not know that about an INFJ, but they certainly can be. And you're probably not going to see that from an INFJ. I mean, because they're different people in different settings, which there's no problem with that. But I mean, the reason why they're different people in different settings is because they have different goals and different things that they want to accomplish, and they like to see their goals met in the world. And that's different. I mean, I would dare anybody to find me an INFJ who's not somewhat conscientious. That's not likely. They're not that way to be cute. I mean, that's definitely not the case, I don't know. I just want clarification because I keep getting messages or comments on those videos, and I don't. I mean, I sometimes I do just say things in the moment in terms of trying to really draw on the well of creativity that I have because it was my goal in the first place to some extent when I got on YouTube to learn to do things impromptu and to be more extemporaneous than how I was maybe 4 years ago, or yeah, about 4 years ago, in the sense that I had to think for a very, very long time before I made a statement, and I was pretty pedantic, and I'm still that way a lot of times in conversation, and especially in terms of the ways in which I tend to present information. But the downside to that, I suppose, is that I don't always try to encase something in the total framework that it's a part of, partly because it's too big. I mean, I don't want to start from the bottom and talk about what I think about human nature in general and what I think that human beings are in general that makes it such that I know to some extent that every personality and every type is all too human, such that there is just a constraint in terms of all that they can be and what in terms of what they can be as human beings. And I know that there is a difference between who we will ourselves to be, who we act out in the world, versus what we are. And I know that there's a difference between the brain as an organ and the mind in terms of whatever that is. It's a fairly complex thing. But oftentimes when I'm talking in a video, I'm just trying to present a particular point, really only because I just find that kernel or that grain interesting at a specific moment in time for various reasons, and usually it has to do with the fact that people are talking about this thing or that thing or the other, and that's what I'm sharing. Mostly because I don't want to talk about things that other people have talked about. I don't see the point in doing something like that. I mean, if I were on YouTube making another MBTI video that just hashed out the qualities of an INFJ in terms of whatever you find on personality junkie or celebrity types or you name it, I mean, it's just, well, that wouldn't be very interesting to me. I wouldn't waste my time doing something like that. And I do just, even though I'm not trying to revise typology or anything like that any longer, I would just like to tie it to more broader topics just because those things have something to say about, well, what can you say and what can't you say about a personality type in general. Because there's something that's more broader and to me more deterministic, I should just say, and important than type alone, and that has to do with our phenomenology, our being, and that a lot of that has to do with evolution and various other factors and forces. With that being the most primary, and so I don't know. What am I going to do with my channel next? I don't really know. But I do know that I would like for people to take things in terms of a context. Put it all in context. And I know most people on YouTube put all of their points on nice little PowerPoint slides and stick to 5 bullets and make it and do summaries at the end and all sorts of so on and so forth, so it's easier for you to retain the information and so that it's more, I suppose, coherent or easier to understand. Coherent, I guess, is the best word. I mean, maybe how I present things is not completely coherent. But it's definitely the case that, though that be the case, that is not how I operate, in the sense that I do these things rather spontaneously. And if you please do the due diligence of just, if you look at one thing INFJ, look at all the things INFJ that I make, and I assure you that it's not one-sided. I don't think that I don't ever think anything's that simple either. I mean, I don't know why people think that. I don't think things are that simple. I think most things are complicated. So my descriptions and the overall way that they're connected with one another is going to be somewhat complicated. But I don't think of that as complicated. I mean, I can literally split the INFJ into two different modes of being in terms of their relating to people. And that's their relational self, and that's their social political self. And I think the relational self and the social political self are two different individuals. And whatever anybody wants to say about that, they can say it, but those two ways of being do not seem to be the same thing to me. And the way in which most MBTI literature, I guess, is written about INFJs, it only focuses on the relational kind of metaphysical being, and they're much more than that. They're very much more than that. So at least from my perspective. So yeah, please wrap it all up in a context and a nice bow. In fact, I'll make a playlist on INFJ stuff, I guess. INFJ stuff. I'll just make a playlist called INFJ stuff. But, I mean, it's not going to be super extensive because I don't talk about them that much. I don't talk about type in general that much, but I know that, well, yeah. So, it's my video. Two INFJs. I suppose that's what this will be called. Anyways, that's my video, and thank you for watching.